Okay, so thank you so much, JD. Thank you for that sharp analysis on how the priorities of science today seems to satisfy capitalism and the pursuit of profit, war, and destruction. How much science is actually alienated from the masses who can actually suffer at the hands of this technology, and also how mass movement is key to reorienting science and technology to truly serve the people. So to all our speakers, thank you again. Now we'd like to invite you to the Q&A portion of the program. To our audience, our team has already compiled your questions for our speakers, and we will try to entertain all of your questions, time permitting. Feel free to keep sending in your questions through the Zoom chat or by commenting on the live stream.
Yes, so for those on Zoom, there should be a button at the bottom of your Zoom with the questions and answers. So please send your questions there.
Thank you. And while people are asking their questions, we'll pose some of the ones asked so far to the panelists. So this first question goes out to all of our panelists tonight. It's the 75th anniversary of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki this year, an event that signaled the start of the threat of global nuclear destruction. How do you see anti-militarism activists today linking up into a global anti-war movement to stop the global nature of this threat?
Candice here. Right now, for the next while, I can't see any global movement happening because of the pandemic. It's absolutely necessary. Like with ICANN, unfortunately, the United States and all of the nuclear powers did not sign on to that treaty. And so it is going to have to come from the people. But right now, the people in places like the US are under siege from those corporate powers. And that's the latest, the corporates are hanging on tight to their money. And that's what I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice. Does any of the other speakers want to tackle the question? How do we build a global anti-militarism movement today?
Hi, this is Win with Resist US-Led War. And adding to that, I agree, like we really need a people's movement. And it has to start from the grassroots, ground up. It takes organizations and coalitions to really wage campaigns and continue to agitate, organize, and mobilize the people against nuclear warfare, against militarization. And we've seen that done historically. We've seen that done by the youth and students. We've seen that done, on those kind of campaigns waged by people that are being impacted in nations outside of the US because there should not be further destruction. There should be more of attention to people's needs. And right now, amidst the pandemic, there is absolutely no reason there should be another dollar of spending towards war. The people's demands are, mass testing. It's for direction of public funds to education, health, and all those areas. And so a people's movement requires being united, against this type of destruction, and being united on aiming and fighting for just and last peace. So I think the 75th anniversary of bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki should really call us into reflection that this this fight isn't over. The impacts of nuclear warfare in the Asia Pacific, in the Marshall Islands, from the health issues that this kind of nuclear warfare has costs are still being felt many generations after. And so we have a duty to build that people's movements, and we have a duty to resist US-led war.
I'm a pretty novice at organizing, so I applaud Candyce, Marius, and Win-Mon for offering their insights and wisdom. So as someone who's jumped into the space rather recently, I myself like to, because it's so easy to get despondent and depressed, especially, if we're going to call in a mass movement, more people, that don't see the impact, so they're not compelled to just jump into the street because they have to for survival, right? Like people from bourgeoisie say, it helps me when I see even small victories and people in struggle. So like, I really love Democracy Now! Because their heart is with the people's movement, right? But there's not a lot of outlets like that, which I guess like highlights my love for the program. But I think the more young people get into journalism and show what they're doing, the organizers themselves, right, that they're out there, and social media, I believe, has helped with this, right? The more it builds, is all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for answering that question. Gonna keep on moving on with some more questions. This one was specifically directed for Win-Mon, Candyce, and Marius. How can scientists, engineers, and tech workers and others help out with the specific issues that you're facing in the areas you live in? Yeah, and it looks like Candyce will answer that one.
That's the kind of people I need really badly. The research and development has primarily focused on what the industries want, and like the epidemiological stuff and the impacts and proofs that we need, because everything that we fight, we have to fight on the basis of science. So I need the science, I need the technicians, I need that technical language to fight the industry with, to prove that it's killing our people, to prove that the studies have been done that show this. But right now they literally own the universities and what will be researched. And it's really hard. I can't, people are afraid, scientists are afraid to come forth and say the truth. I spoke with one scientist off the record who did a study on moose, which is one of the primary foods that we eat in the North. And the fact that it was high in uranium, polonium, and other heavy metals. And they said, yeah, but it's below the safety level. So I asked her, well, what do you think about the safety levels? Because I know that the industry sets the safety levels. And she says, now you're asking the right question, but I can't go on record on that, or I'll never work again. So we need some courageous scientists. We need some courageous money to pay those scientists. And that's, I need hydrologists, I need biologists, I need them all to prove that, the contamination and the disruption to the environment is just too high of a cost, and to our lives as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Candyce, and thank you for particularly calling out the courage that is needed from people in this time, the courage to actually say what is happening to protect people's lives over profit. Thank you so much. Win-Mon, the same question. What is it that scientists and tech workers can do in the area that you organize in?
So in the area that I organize in the Bay Area, and that also near, South Bay, Silicon Valley. Oh man, we need, scientists, tech workers, like all in the movement, everyone across each part of that complex, that assembly line that is all part of this large military industrial complex, right? It really does take courage. It takes organizing, knowledge, and coming together to really denounce and have a position that any effort, none of my labor should go towards deaths, here and abroad, and having that firm position, includes taking action. And so in our area, in the Bay Area, Pacific Northwest, and like SoCal, where Resist US-led War is trying to push towards a campaign in looking at Boeing and seeing that what kind of people's movement will it take to denounce like Boeing's atrocities, and Boeing's commitment to developing and manufacturing weapons that ultimately are being used, in the Philippines, in India, and so in the area of Bay Area specifically, there has been examples of different organizations, coalitions, like the tech workers coalitions that will say, no, we firmly believe we will not accept this contract. We are workers, and we're going to take the position that we're not going to take on this task. Our task is to serve the people, not towards profit that will go towards to the interest of the few. And I think specifically with the Boeing campaign, it's going to also take a global grassroots movement, and so we do need to rely on the research and that analysis that's happening in this field. The people that are building it. We want to learn from what is happening in different parts where there are factories. In the Pacific Northwest, there's a Boeing factory. In California, the surveillance industry towards the military is massive, and so people. The base of people's movement in this area is very, very needed. And we have Boeing's headquarters in Chicago. So it's really going to take a global coordinated effort. And so, and the role of, scientists is especially like critical at this moment. And so if you are like a scientist, if you're the investigator, if you're, in any kind of field, in regards to that, now's the moment to really take that firm position, to have science for the people, to take that position and to wage that fight together.
Thank you so much, both Candyce and Win-Mon, for answering that question. Another question, this one I'll pose to JD. So it's clear from the talks that all of you have given tonight that we can't separate science from history. We can't separate science from class and the class interests that are behind it. So my question, JD, how do you envision science outside of its current capitalist framework?
Thank you for the question. I'll be honest, I don't know. It's somehow going to have to respond more directly to the needs of the people. So I mean, the only thing I can sketch out in my head right now is somehow, right, like being part of this capitalist configuration, right, like is to draw the power from capital, right, and somehow have science address the pains where they truly are, right? Not the pains of generating more money, right? But somehow devise the infrastructure, to meet the needs of the most needy, right? And like the market is not good at that. The market sees price signals. And so, you know, I believe in the creative power of people to figure out how to do that. I haven't, you know, but I think the way I like to look at it optimistically is because so many people in the world are disempowered from even having their voice heard, that some smart kid out there, right, is figuring it out, or, you know, like taking it away from the individual unit, a community might have figured out a way, right? But they need to be lent that voice to show the world like how they're devising these new structures, you know. But you know, I don't have an answer, but you know, as say an engineer, it's a hopeful thing to look forward, right, to seeing someone tackle that, seeing the world tackle that as a problem. So I hope you're satisfied with that non-answer. Thank you.
That's why we got a whole league here. We got lots of non or somewhat answers to work on together, right? Thank you, JD. The last question I wanted to pose to y'all is, you know, they say there's a famous saying, the revolution will not be televised, but I guess somehow it's got to be funded. So we have a question here, which is, how can we attract research funds to support research for the people? And I think I'll expand that a bit more. Like, how can we find research funds, maybe not even just in the institutional way we're used to getting funding, but how do we really muster the resources we need by any means possible to wage a mass movement like this? And I'll pose that to all of our panelists.
That is the ultimate question. You know, we can attract and try to enlist scientists, but they need a place to work. And those places to work require the funding. A lot of the work is field work, you know, so, you know, the writing for grants and looking for capital to do that is, you know, very, very time consuming when we don't have the time, because most of us are just volunteers and on zero budgets, and the time that it takes to do this, things are moving forward too fast for us. So we need help. We always need help. You know, because all those funders require records and they want reports and all of those things. So I would just love people to just come forth and do it, you know, like it needs to be done, let's do it. That's my feeling, but I understand the costs involved. But the recruitment is a starting point that I think could happen. So, and it has to be safe for those people to do that, because they have to live after the fact. So, you know, and you know, when we're talking nuclear, like we've been nuclear war, nuclear weapons, that's a huge cartel. We've gone to battle with them, you know, on social media. They have people paid just to battle us. You know, like they pay them to do that. So like, it's They follow us. They know what we're doing. They know what we're saying. They know what we're working on. And I'm not even just being, paranoid. They do. They have software programs where our names come up. They're listening in. And that's how it is. Because that's how big they are and that's how much control they want to keep. So, I hope you're aware of that already. And, but yeah, we need to get busy with them because they're going too fast. That's all I can say about that question, because I'm not rich and I don't know where that money's going to come from. And right now, with the way things are in the economy around the world, maybe it just can crash and it'll solve itself. But we'll still have nuclear. We'll still have it because all of that nuclear waste is still sitting there.
So thank you so much, Candice. Either other speakers want to take a try at that question?
I can pipe in with a similar non-answer to the previous question. I think it's a great question because it calls for sort of breakthroughs in financial innovation, right? That's not geared towards capitalists, that somehow funds the people. And again, I don't have any genius solutions, but I'm hoping that it can come about. I think that would be revolutionary. But, I do think we have other proven ways of at least like mitigating capitalist accumulation, right? One of them being taxes, and that again requires a people's movement because, like capitalists have commandeered the narrative, right? Like say with the American dream, it's just, just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you too can become a capitalist, right? You too can be Jeff Bezos. And enough people believe that they put people like Bezos on a pedestal, right? And not tax them because taxing them would be punishing capitalist motivations. And, once they have you in your head, then they've won you, right? So, like to fund the war, if I understand, it was like more than the highest marginal tax bracket in the US was like more than 90%, right? And so I think when you translate it in today's dollars, it'd be $3 million, right? So like back, I think during the days of Eisenhower, if you made more than $3 million, 90% of it went to taxes, which is essentially a huge disincentive to make more than $3 million, right? Like, so, back during the days of Eisenhower, Bezos wouldn't have existed. And I think we need something like that, really, like imagine just taxing the billionaires, right? How much that would put in the pockets of people, right? To address people's needs. Add to that things like establishing like a wealth fund, right? Which is not anything new. Alaska has it, right? From their oil wealth. Norwegians have it from their oil wealth, right? And it sits from the understanding that oil extraction exacts a heavy toll on the communities and society at large, right? In terms of, say, global warming, climate change, right? And so those negative externalities, that is, those negative impacts from those industries, right, should result in the awarding of the people because they benefit negatively from it, right? So until those extractive industries are abolished, You know, if they're going to make money, like give that money, give those profits to the people. And so I think it's like it's an issue of commandeering the narrative, right? And I think, you know, on the bright side, versus like the sweep of history, the last 60 years or so, neoliberal era, right? Like the news, the story has been democratized, right? Like we have social media, and that's again like coming under the reins of capitalist power, but it's harder for them because it's not one TV channel, you know. But they're still trying, and we should resist that too, and we should produce the news, right? Produce news and narratives that empower us. So that is my answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice and JD. And along the lines of that, you know, ultimately it does come down to people power. And when people are decisive to join a mass movement, they will always learn how to link together and support each other with resources. It's about winning hearts and minds, and that is the life or death struggle, right? And the more people who we see resisting imperialist war as a life or death struggle are more people who will help rally resources, you know? And what this question, it's an amazing question, right? You know, it's already thinking about what alternative ways we can actually democratically use funding towards. And again, it's towards people's needs. And so, yes, let's continue rallying. Let's continue our commitment against imperialist war.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much, Candice, Marius, Win-Mon, JD. Thank you for your answering the questions. And I'm going to hand it back to Abby, who will finish our webinar up today.
So thank you very much to our speakers, as well as everyone who participated in the Q&A. So we are now approaching the end of our program. Please stay until after our final speaker for the photo op. For the closing remarks, our last speaker is a member of AGHAM, an organization based in the Philippines that aims to make science and technology serve the people, which is also a core member of ILPS Commission 13. Let's give it up for Ana Senastial.
Can you hear me? So, on behalf of the Commission 13 on Science and Technology for the People of the ILPS, or the International League of People Struggle, we would like to thank all panelists for their very powerful and informative inputs. We'd also like to thank all the participants for their very good questions, for taking your time to attend this webinar. Just to quickly summarize or synthesize what has been discussed, I think there are three main points we can look into. So first is that the social costs of militarism and its connected colonialism that goes into it because of the need to extract resources from different countries is very high. So Candice and Marius very powerfully articulated how their communities, the IP community, is affected by the nuclear industry in particular. So you have the health costs that make them vulnerable, even succeeding generations vulnerable to new and emerging diseases like the COVID pandemic we have now. We have the ecosystems that have been damaged and contaminated and can never be gotten back. And of course, you have the livelihoods affected, how the military industrial complex, or in particular the nuclear industry, is keeping people in poverty to make them dependent on their uranium extraction, for example, in the case of Candice and Marius. So there's really no economic development happening in the sides of the communities, but of course, the capitalists who are extracting all the profits are making all the money. And of course, as beautifully articulated by Marius, it's not just the ecosystems, the health, and the livelihoods affected, but also the cultures and the indigenous knowledge systems that are being affected as foreign industries want to extract the resources for militarism in different communities. So they try to impose their own culture and destroy the local culture and knowledge systems. So yeah, the first point is the very high social cost, a cost to people of militarism. Not just at the beginning stages of the military industrial complex, but also, of course, the people in the communities are being directly bombed and surveilled and, being policed by these military systems. So second, of course, is that we have seen through the presentations of Candice, Marius, Win-Mon, and also JD that, of course, profit is at the heart of everything, even in the military industry. We saw how the military industry is a multi-billion industry with the US at the lead. Even governments are being co-opted. And institutions, academic institutions, are at the mercy of the profit motive, seeing how defense contracts have dominated research. And it all highlights a basic feature of capitalism. And of course, now we're in the era of monopoly capitalism where a few dominate the whole world to amass profit at the interests over the interests of the people. So we have the wars to secure economic interest. At the same time, the wars also secures a very lucrative position for the military industrial complex. And of course, as JD has mentioned, science is also at the mercy of the profit motive. So you have the domination of the very juicy defense contracts in different universities and research institutions. Science is very much an integral part of the capitalist enterprise. So science is essentially a tool which can be used for people's development or for war, which, as JD has put, is a dual nature of science. So while science is being used for research into defense, scientists are being alienated from the masses for whom it should be directed towards. So the last point is that we are all connected globally. So the war on the people is not just happening in the front lines, but in the communities affected from extractive activities and upstream activities of the military industrial complex. So internationally, we can also fight back. So that is the very powerful message of this webinar that we hope everyone will take back. So internationally, we can unite. Like JD has shown how historically the student movement in the 60s around the Vietnam War has emerged and led to the formation of science for the people. It is not just in the US, but also throughout the world. Basically, the student movement, activist movement really flourished during the late 60s up to the 70s. We have the nuclear disarmament movements internationally. And of course, there is the importance of the mass movements internationally to pressure governments to lead to reforms in the policy space. So, as has been mentioned, the Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, etc. So, specifically, scientists are and can also fight back. So, JD has shown us the different movements by scientists like the Russell Einstein Manifesto, Emergency Committee of Atomic Scientists, and then even the Science for the People organization in the US. I'm a member actually of a scientist activist organization in the Philippines. We're called AGHAM, and we are also organizing different scientists and technologists, engineers to push for a science for the people, which includes a science for peace and not just for war. A good point raised by Win-Mon is that even tech workers are uniting and pressuring companies like Google not to take on defense contracts or contracts in the service of surveillance systems and other military systems in the US. And the science also offers the politics of hope and joy. Science has applications for peace and not for war. So you can have scientists respond more directly to the needs of the people. And as beautifully raised by Candice and Win-Mon, we need more scientists and tech workers to bravely use our technical skills and knowledge, not just to advocate against war, but to serve affected communities and communities in the grassroots. I think it's also an answer to one of the Q&A questions, like how do we change the framework of scientists who are like very focused to just the research that is being dictated by capitalism and the military industrial complex. We need to get our scientists go to the communities so they can see firsthand how they are being impacted by the development aggressions, by extractivism, by the military complex. So I think that will have a very big impact because that's also one of the things that we do in my organization in the Philippines, AGHAM. We make sure that the scientists go to the communities so they see firsthand what they're experiencing and hear firsthand um, the powerful statements, the powerful uh, declarations of the people of what's happening to them and what scientists can do to help them. A last point around the international connection that we all have is we really need to have a continuing international solidarity. So we need to build, as Win-Mon has mentioned, we need to build a global anti-militarism movement that starts from the grassroots or from the ground up. So right now, actually, there are a couple of organizations existing towards that goal. So one of the organizations, of course, the organizer of this webinar, the ILPS, is the International League of People's Struggles. It was formed actually to confront the root of militarism and war, which is imperialism or monopoly capitalism. So ILPS is arranged into commissions. So we have, for example, Commission 4 on just peace and against imperialism and wars of aggression. And we have Commission 13, the commission that is organizing this webinar, which is the Commission on Science and Technology for the People. So we encourage our participants to join the ILPS. We can have organizational members, and we can also have individual supporters of the ILPS to keep the conversation going forward. Of course, this is just a start. You can join the different listservs or FB groups of the different, like the Resist US War led coalition and the ILPS Commissions 4 and Commissions 13. We're going to send you links after the webinar. We got your emails. We're going to send you the follow-up emails. And right now, due to the pandemic, many people are online. So we can maximize our online platforms to connect with each other, to carry on this conversation, and to hopefully build positive engagements, build more actions, mass actions, or joint activities going forward. So that's all. So thank you again to all our panelists or attendees. And we have another webinar coming up next week. I think Abby will share the details to you. Thank you.
So thank you, Anna. And that is the end of our program for today. Thank you to everyone who attended. We would just like to remind everyone that registration for part 2 of the webinar is still open, and you can register at bit.ly/research and destruction 2. So that's bit.ly/research and destruction 2. Now, for those who would want to join the photo op, please stay on the webinar so we can add you to the screen for the screenshot. For those who don't, you may now leave the room. Thank you very much and see you next week for part 2 of the webinar.